How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Would you mind telling me your name and who you're with?
It's Jared Haas, and I'm the owner and founder of Blackrabbit Design Build in Austin, Texas.
Cool. So tell me, where are we?
Where are we?
Yeah.
So the house is Friar Tuck. It's 2708 Friar Tuck. It's in the St. Ed's neighborhood. St. Edward's University is, if you were to pan your camera around, it's right there. So we're pretty much on campus in Austin, Texas. And it's a central part of Texas, the south of the river, close proximity to just about everything. And it's this weird little anomaly and pocket that hasn't really, I guess, been gentrified quite yet or discovered until pretty much recently. So we jumped on this project pretty early on, actually during the pandemic. My business partner, who was also a former employee, lived over in this neighborhood. He had found this prior to the pandemic and lived here. And then actually I would go walk his dog and my dog too at the time over here at St. Ed's campus. And I just slowly fell in love with the neighborhood. St. Ed's campus is incredible, actually. It's just, no one goes there. And it's, so you have this whole place to yourself. And there's all these little architectural gems and just cool views and just things to discover. So I would just wander around, let the dog off the leash and not be disturbed. It was pretty amazing.
So this is not a new build, right? This is a renovation project. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are surprised about that. Don't quote me on the year right now, but it was either late 50s or early 60s, the house. I forget the exact number. But it was an existing structure. It was about 1,200 square feet. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. The volume that we're in right now, it's that's the existing structure. A lot of people, they don't know where the addition begins and ends.
Right.
It's pretty simple. If you were to zoom out, there's a volume. There's 2 volumes. There's a there's a very just vernacular Monopoly style structure, single story structure, and then there's this from the outside obtrusive rectilinear volume that comes off it. It's pretty cut and dry, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, if you can kind of see where the flooring ends and the new concrete begins, and that's basically it.
Mm-hmm. What does authentic design mean to you, and how did you implement that philosophy in this home?
It's something that's kind of, I've culminated a bunch of different principles and values over the years. It was when I started my firm, I guess coming out of school even, it was just kind of like, let's just do cool architecture, right?
Right.
I didn't really have a value system, but I started to, over the years, gravitate towards certain things. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't put my finger on it. What's the crux of these things, right? I was really interested in soil architecture. I was really interested in urban planning, new urbanism. Mm-hmm. I was really interested in green design. But what was really driving these things together? And it was really, I don't know if it was really just, I kind of had this aha moment or epiphany that it's really just authenticity. It's really how we're really meant to live.
Right.
And I think over generations, we've started to steer away from that, right, quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And even though we may not be able to bring all these, I put those into a bunch of different principles and articulated those as best as I could with the idea that we try to apply these principles as many as possible, as much as possible.
Sure.
Given the nature and environments of a project and the scope of a project, for example, I can't do mixed use on this lot, right? So how do we apply some of these principles as much as possible?
What does material integrity mean to you, and how did you also make it as part of the home?
I don't remember which architect coined it, but honesty in materials, right? I don't know if that was Le Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright. I do remember hearing about that, but it's something that resonated with me early on in college. And it's the idea that trying to make a material and not something else, right? Just celebrating it the way it is. So, I mean, I can go on and on about a lot of the different examples in here, but let's take an easy one, the Thermory siding, right? It's ash wood, it's thermally modified, which just means it's baked quite a bit, right? And that makes it more dimensionally stable, and it makes it naturally rot resistant as well. And we didn't apply any stains. We didn't really apply any finishes, sealers, anything to it. If you were to go out there and look at it, it's now starting to patina to a gray, kind of like a fine wine. To me, it's celebrating its authentic self and allowing it to breathe and be what it wants to be. We do that a lot with a lot of our materials, not just wood. I mean, there's clay plaster in here. It's wouldn't add any pigments, stains. There's no chemicals. There's nothing altering it. It's the base clay product from American clay that we applied to the walls, and just kind of let it be what it wants to be.
Very nice. What was the inspiration that drove you to design the home?
Design this home, or
yes.
Again, given a program of what it is, the first thing was it is a bit performer driven, right? So you're trying to balance the numbers out, and at the time there was no new construction in this neighborhood. It was already an ambitious endeavor what we ended up doing, even today. And this was 5 years ago when we started the project.
Oh wow!
Started thinking about the design, started trying to put everything together. But it was a remodel, right? First and foremost, and so we had to learn to work with the existing constraints of the remodel, and then with the city regulations and what our box is, and work outside in from there. Yeah. So given the constraints, we're only allowed to do certain things, and beyond that, then we have to kind of use our artistic expression to think outside the box and go beyond the means of what's still allowable, but what is acceptable in the environment, right?
Sure.
And what I mean by that is, no offense to other builders, but there's a lot of just bigger, faster, cheaper white box homes out there, right? And then you just throw in the nice appliances and maybe some AV components, and that's supposed to be impressive. And we were trying to get away from that. The inspiration is really just authenticity, trying to go back to what we connect with, what resonates as a human being, as a social culture. How we're really meant to live, in my opinion, and from, I guess, more of an anthropological perspective, what resonates with humans. And I think nature, bringing in nature, tying the building in from the outside to the inside, connecting spaces, connecting people, having communal spaces, a lot of these things that align with our principles. Trying to pull those all together as best we can, given that there's an existing structure and we have limited constraints on how much we're allowed to build and what we're allowed to do, and tying that all together.
What kind of experience or feelings were you hoping for someone to have if they were to come into this home?
I think a lot of people have pinpointed it, and they're right. Not just this house, I think a lot of times I see resorts and I think, well, why can't we just live like this every day, right?
Yeah.
But more than that, what is it about resorts that really excites us? Why do we pay all this money to escape, and why do we love this? And how do we pull that into how we live on a daily basis? I think there's a lot of aspects of resort living that really relate to authentic living. They kind of check a lot of the boxes. And there's certain things that we can do, certain things that we can't do, but it's trying to pull certain things into the house as best we can, right? We can't have mixed use living out there, right? A lot of resorts have restaurants, and so it's all encompassing, and so you don't have to leave the compound, but they're all very pedestrian oriented, right? And so you might have, you park your car and that's it. You don't really get into your car until you have to leave a lot of these resorts. That's kind of the idea here, is that we want to create a compound that you don't feel like you want to ever have to leave unless you really need to. And it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. It's probably not going to be a single person living here. It's going to be probably a small family, maybe a couple, and even if it's just a couple or small family, they're going to have guests. And we have a whole detached guest house, and we have a common area, courtyard that the whole house surrounds, that's intended to connect everybody and bring everyone together. So it's really meant to be a communal space.
Very cool. I've heard a lot of folks talk about how it reminds them of someplace tropical like Tulum or Columbia. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, everyone says that, and everyone says something different. It's usually Tulum.
Yeah.
But I think that's just because that's where they travel the most here in Austin, right? When they go to Mexico, they go to Tulum. I don't think that's really much of an accident. If you look at old world places like Mexico, Europe, South America, they designed with the natural materials. A lot of these cities and towns were built before the age of the car, right? And so they weren't designed around the car; they were designed around the pedestrian. And they used a lot of handcrafted technologies or techniques and materials. And so we want to bring some of that craft back into the house and some of those old world concepts. So it's not surprising that everyone has a different answer, and it's usually somewhere that's very old world that they mentioned. I think it's mostly the materials that probably draw them to those concepts and those conclusions that it's this feels like somewhere I don't know where, and chances are it's somewhere that you visited that's outside of the U.S.
Right. What's your favorite part of the home?
That's a tough question. I think our main goal is to not design good parts of homes, right? We try to pull everything together and try to make it as holistic as possible. Even this being an addition, I think is it's good testament that people walk in and they don't know that it's an addition and remodel, first of all. They don't, and then even when I tell them that, they say, well, where does it begin and where does it end, right? From the inside, it's pretty difficult. From the outside, it's a little bit more apparent, but that's kind of was the primary goal, is to pull everything together and not make it feel like it was ever an afterthought or designed in pieces, right? But I will say, too, to kind of better answer your question, I think most people would say the outdoor shower for some reason.
Yeah.
They love that outdoor shower.
Yeah.
To me, it was just kind of a given, like, well, why wouldn't you have an outdoor shower, right? But I guess that really is an anomaly in Austin, even though we do very well to design towards outdoor spaces. We don't see outdoor showers, I guess, too often, and outdoor showers that have kind of like a little courtyard feel to it, that have that privacy. It's tough to incorporate that, given our constraints of Austin code and market and everything that I'm just not going to get into otherwise.
Sure. What was it like to have Newcastle Homes involved with the construction of the home?
It was honestly fantastic. They helped out with the last probably third or so of the project. We started off with trying to do this ourselves with project managers, or it was just me and a project manager, and that made it really tough. The project was kind of dragging on. We started the project in 2021, late 2021, early 2022, and that was when the market was really tough. And Newcastle has decades of experience, and they have teams of people. So when we worked with them, we were able to get project managers, superintendents, people with accounting experience, all the above. So we're able to lean on them and their resources a lot more than we would have been able to do on our own. They just bring a whole nother level of expertise. I'd worked with Lex off and on for well over a decade on different projects, and so I kind of knew what they were capable of doing and where my limits were, and they just filled in the gaps. I come at it from a different side. They come at it from construction side. I come at it from a design approach, right? And it was just a perfect marriage as well, right? You don't want your contractor coming up with design solutions all the time, and vice versa. Sometimes you don't want your architect coming up with the construction solutions. So we had really good communication. We knew we've got a rhythm working together and experience working together. It was like second nature having them come into this project and help take over.
What was one of the main challenges designing or building this home, and how did you overcome that?
That's a curveball, because there's so many different directions and answers I can go in. I think trying to design it as a spec house, but designed like a custom house, right? Monetarily speaking, it has its challenges, right? I didn't want to compromise anything. I think anyone there's a reason why this took 3 years to build, wherein it should have taken 2 years. Part of it was the market, as I aforementioned, started in 2021. 2022 was a really, really tough year. But also, I think a lot of people in my network, and I had some mentors helping me out, and their advice to just anything was, for example, it took months to build these site glazed windows, and it was dragging on for various reasons. And one of my mentors said, if that were me, I just would have gone and got some Anderson vinyl windows and popped them in and called it a day, right? And I'm very uncompromised. And I said, no, that's not the point of this project. That's not going to give me the outcome and desires that I want. So I was very bullish about trying to make sure that we stayed on track to make it very design driven and not performer driven, right? And so what developers would consider splurged on a lot of different elements. The American clay plaster, it would have been much cheaper, much faster, much easier to do sheetrock and paint, right? A compromise would have been to do a roll-on lime plaster, but then have all the benefits and health benefits that American clay has to offer. And so it was really tough finding somebody just to even do that. So every aspect of this house was a challenge. Like I said, there's so many different answers and directions.
For sure. Pull it off. You did a great job.
Yeah, thank you.
The bedroom, I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was unique. And can you tell me about what inspired you, or why did you design the bedroom the way it is, which is where, you're laying down, and if you look up, you pretty much have like a window looking up to the sky. So tell me a little bit about that design approach.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm going to throw the question back at you if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You mentioned the skylight, but what do you felt most unique about that? What is something about that bedroom that you don't typically see that really drew you to it? I'm curious.
What drew me to the bedroom was the light coming from the ceiling.
Okay.
And I liked it personally because I don't use an alarm clock.
Yeah.
I usually like to wake up when that blue tone comes out.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I just thought it was amazing. I just thought, what better way to wake up, with the light just kind of hitting your face.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I think, there's no substitute for natural lighting, right? There's nothing better than trying to get in tune with circadian rhythms and utilizing natural lighting to know when to go to bed and when to wake up. We're fortunate enough that the sun never gets overhead directly until midday in the summer, and so you get a lot of soft light overhead that beams through. And it's not just the sunlight aspect, it's also sitting in bed, looking up and seeing the stars at night. Yeah. That was kind of the purpose. We wanted to make it it's actually a two-pane skylight, and we tried to make it as large as possible and as unobstructed as possible, so you get a direct view of whatever's overhead, right? That was an important aspect, but also the privacy factor, right? So most people have just windows either throughout the bedroom or one central location where they have floor-to-ceiling windows. A lot of people design primary bedrooms to have windows either throughout, or they have a single area where you have floor-to-ceiling glass. But the problem with that, especially on a site like this, is you lose sense of privacy. Yeah. So we detach the primary lounge space from the bed space, and we have sliding glass doors right there in the lounge area that opens up to the deck. Right. So that could be closed off, or could be part of the quote-unquote communal space of the deck area. Leave the primary bed own its own little quarters and have its own little private area. Problem is, without having floor-to-ceiling windows or any windows in that space, you lose daylight. Daylight's really important. Right. So we put it overhead. So that was another reason.
Very cool. Tell me about these massive double sliding doors that you have here in the family room that opens out to the deck.
Well, not only are they massive sliding doors, but they pocket. And the idea was wouldn't it be great to not have doors, right?
Yeah.
The problem is we're in Austin, Texas, and there's a lot of times out of the year that's not very feasible, like today, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We're approaching 100-something degrees today, and you're probably not going to pocket those doors on a day like this. But we've had some pretty cool nights, and if this were my house, I would have that open at night. Barring mosquitoes, if you can control that.
Sure, yeah.
But opening that up at night, capturing the breezes. If you look behind us, we've got a dining space. This is our dining area, right? So we have a dining table that sits right in front of this. If you open that up, you can have a covered dining area that is outside at the same time, right? So it could be indoors and outdoors. So it's a way of kind of blurring the lines and connecting the indoors with the outdoors. And you could also close it off and you have the glass, and so visually it feels like that, but functionally you can actually do it by pocketing the entire doors. And it's not just this set, but there's a set over there at the primary lounge area that does the exact same thing.
Right, so you were trying to create that same open space where the outdoor meets the indoor for the primary bedroom as well.
I think a large concept of this is blurring the lines between indoors, outdoors, blurring the uses of spaces. So it's this dining area is also part of the deck area, part of the communal area, right? It becomes multifunctional that way as well. It's level with the deck, and so it just blends seamlessly straight across indoors and outdoors.
What other things do you think it would be valuable for you to talk about if I missed anything?
We talked about materials quite a bit. One thing I really didn't mention is longevity of these materials, right? And they're a little bit more forgiving than most materials. So, for example, we have exposed concrete floors in the addition. The reason we didn't do that in the existing area is because these floors were so beat up from, we had pretty poor soils coming in, and the previous owner had tried to repair the slab by putting a bunch of piers throughout. So there's a lot of these holes that weren't cleaned up. And when we did, it just left a lot of exposed patchwork of concrete that wasn't really, we couldn't clean it up and we couldn't leave it exposed. So we had to put these wood floors in, unfortunately. But our response to that was we left the actual structural slab in the addition exposed, and we just grounded an eighth of an inch so you can kind of see that exposed aggregate. And that not only does it celebrate the inner beauty of the concrete by bringing it to the surface, but also pulls up a little bit of forgiveness. So you're going to get some hairline fractures and things like that. And the idea is, not trying to fight that, but trying to celebrate those things. Concrete's always shifting; it actually never settles, right? And so it's a dynamic material, and we want it to be what it is, and let it breathe, and let it take shape, and let it crack, and let it be, let it transform over the years. So that's just kind of one example that I think that for as long as someone doesn't come and cover it up, will always be there to outlast us, our great grandkids, hopefully. Same thing with the wood. So the Thermory siding, for example, I mentioned that it's real wood. It's baked. It's more dimensionally stable. It's rot resistant, but also we put it on a rain screen. What that means is it's called furring it out. So you put it on little strips of corrugated plastic that allow it to drain through over top of your waterproofing barrier. But also, so water can drain behind it and around it, and then air circulates around the entire board that way, and so allows it to dry off, right? And that way you don't get moisture trapped inside or behind or between the boards. And you won't get mold and rot and some of the things that end up deteriorating and warping the materials. So it's just going to last a lot longer. Same thing with the stucco. We have a rain screen barrier behind the stucco as well. That's why it actually hasn't really cracked anywhere, surprisingly, even though it's been up for about a year and a half. It's really about just doing things right for longevity's sake, right? this is really hopefully going to be a generational house.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing we haven't really touched upon is the outdoor casita. Well, we purposely detached it, right? And some people either love or hate it, and that was very intentional. We wanted to feel like it was a separate space. A lot of authenticity revolves around mixing uses and creating diversity of uses. And given that this is a single family lot, you're only allowed to have single family use, there are certain allowances for certain things. So you could have a home office, right? As long as you don't have employees, you could have a home office. If you have kids, I don't, but I know people that do have kids, and they have a hard time working with their kids in their house, right? So having a detached space gives you a sense of privacy, a sense of detachment from where you live, from where you eat, from where you sleep, from where you're watching TV. It pulls you away, right? But you don't have to travel very far. So it could be an office space. It could also be a guest space. It could be for in-laws. It could be for, you could rent it out if you really want to. You can have it for long-term guests, for short-term guests. It's just a multifunctional space. A lot of people, it's not so coincidentally designed to be adjacent to the pool, so it could be a pool house, entertainment space. Someone wants to put a pool table or TV in there. It's whatever they want. We kind of left it to be a clean slate, and then we added a bedroom in there so that if it is a guest space or even an office for a couple, that we have two separate spaces for independent uses.
Have we left out any other important aspects of, or any other types of materials that you want to highlight and talk about?
I think a lot of people ask about the Gabion Wall. I'm trying to think what specific questions they have about the Gabion Wall. I think the biggest thing is they're just surprised that we have it at all. They've never seen it is the number one comment on a residential application. So Gabions you see a lot in civil projects. You're driving down the highway, and they're kind of a quick, cheap, and dirty way to create retaining walls for, for example, a retention pond or something off a highway. They're literally just that. They're just baskets of stones, right? It's a little tougher than that. We actually had to create, we put some reinforcement in there because they're very narrow. We didn't have the width to be able to stack them up quite a bit. But they really are just, they're just steel baskets with stones in them, and they create a courtyard barrier and help enclose the space and give you that privacy because we have a lot of glass, and a lot of that glass faces the street. And it's very exposed and probably makes a lot of people uncomfortable. I'm not a person that really has a problem with privacy, but even that would make it I'm trying to as I'm looking at this, I'm visualizing this without the wall, and it's not the best view otherwise, right? You're right on the street. So it helps create that kind of resort-like detached compound feel and helps complete it. We purposely made it. It's about 6 feet tall, so you can't really see much over it.
No, you can't.
The tree line.
You really do feel in a private space. I mean, you can't even see through it.
Yeah. And that's also kind of an important aspect as well. So in Austin, you have what's called a setback, a 25-foot front yard setback, right? So you're not allowed to build anything within the first 25 feet of your house. That's a lot of space, and most people neglect that space, and they don't really, they put St. Augustine grass and they put some shrubs and call it a day, and they have an entry door and everything's behind the house, all your glass, all your function, everything. We want to utilize all aspects of the lot, and that front yard space to us was pretty valuable. So we created a little garden courtyard area, right, and that wall is really intended to be celebrated as well. So we have the glass facing that wall. You have an incredible view of that wall, and we have some vine plants growing on cross vines actually growing up on that wall. At some point, hopefully one day, that'll flood that wall and it'll become a much greener space as well.
Where can people learn more about this home and some of the other projects that you're working on?
Our website, blackrabbit.co. We have all of our projects on there. You could also reach out to me directly, info@blackrabbit.co.
Okay.
Email is usually best. Yeah, we have even some literature on there. There's a little section about authentic living if you want to learn more about that. That actually has our principles listed on there as well. But yeah, that's our best source to find us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sitting with me and talking about all your amazing projects or this beautiful home. And I look forward to seeing how the rest of your projects are coming on.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.